invest in ourselves. We all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hey everybody, and welcome to A Balanced Life with Dr. Jacquie here at Black Star Network. Each and every week we bring you tools and tips to help you put into your toolkit called Balanced Life. Balanced living isn't easy, and oftentimes we are caught off guard by some of the things that happen, whether we get a diagnosis, whether we have a sudden onset illness, or something other in our lives seems to really take us off the focus that is needed to really stay strong, to stay motivated. Today, the conversation isn't going to be any different, as we've talked a little bit about breast cancer awareness and what it means to take care of individuals who may be going through that particular illness, a person who may have been in a car accident suddenly, someone that may just have some type of immunodeficiency disorder that has just kind of kicked in. All of us can say that during this pandemic, we have faced some type of way in which we have moved ourselves away from taking care of self. So today I am excited to be joined by Stacey Owens, Mocha Lee, and we do have a special guest, Teresa King Robertson. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a caregiver, but also what it means to take care of yourself. Hey everybody, welcome in. Hello. How are y'all doing today? Hey. It is so nice to see each of you here. And, as we begin to open up our show today, I just really want to ask each of you this question. How do you each manage uncertainty? I think as we're talking to our audience about what it means to live balance, we're like all on social media talking about our highs. Oh, this was so amazing. This was wonderful. I was doing this, that, and the other. But very few people are transparent when it comes to when they're having their lows and talking about the things that are personally going on with them. So I want to start with our trainer, our fitness expert, Mocha Lee. How do you and what do you do to help yourself in that space? How do you manage and function?
Oh, it's a good question, Dr. Jacquie. It's a good question. And I want to say my normal reaction to that uncertainty and those times when there's maybe even some trauma, my normal reaction, I think, goes back to being an athlete. And that is, I feel like I need to move my body, believe it or not, and exercise. And the studies show, believe it or not, that, to combat anxiety, if you do move your body, even if it's a low impact type of thing, like just going out for a walk, all those hormones in your body, be it the endorphins and serotonin, all of those hormones kick in to give you more of a feeling of calm. So believe it or not, I don't know if it's just because I ran track, growing up, but usually I have the urge to want to move when things are kind of, it's uncertain or even depressing. I also want to say, of course, I pray. I do pray. I ask God for direction in a certain area. And that's always, that's hands down one of the best methods for me. But honestly, I feel like if more people understood that if you're feeling bad, instead of just pulling the covers over your head and staying in bed, really, you probably, even though it's not natural, should go outside, get some fresh air, get that vitamin D from the sun, and just move, and grab a friend. Of course, you need to talk it out, but that's really the best thing for me when I'm kind of struggling. Yeah.
That sounds great because, I'm listening to you talk, and running is not the first thing that I think about. It's like go into the kitchen, grab a Swiss cake roll, and then sit down and try to figure it out. But that's just me being transparent because I am the little Debbie queen. Stacey Owens.
For me, I'm going to agree with Mocha Lee. You just got to keep moving. So for me, though, not necessarily in terms of moving in exercise, but just moving mentally and telling myself, get up, keep going. When I'm in an uncertain space, if I lay there and do nothing, then I allow for fear to kick in, or I allow for my emotions to get imbalanced. So I have to believe that everything is going to be okay. Everything is going to work out, but you can't get to that next thing if you stop moving. So for me, it's just every day in those spaces, when I'm in those low moments, it's okay, because you're going to have some highs and lows. So it's okay. I don't feel bad or guilty about it, but I don't allow myself to freeze or to stop or to keep or to stop believing or stop doing the thing that I'm supposed to do. I just get up and I take that next step. And believe it or not, if you keep taking those next steps, you'll get on the other side of whatever it is that got you in that low spot, and you'll be able to see clearly what you need to do next. It'll be given to you, but you gotta keep putting some type of action, some type of movement to it, so you don't get stuck and you don't abandon whatever you're trying to do.
I think that those are great tips, because oftentimes we're paralyzed by fear, and the uncertainty and the unknown can move us into that space of not knowing exactly how to navigate what we are experiencing in the moment. Today, we do have a special guest who's going to be with us throughout our show, and her name is Teresa King Robertson. Welcome, Teresa.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to the show.
I'm excited that you're here. Tell us a little bit about yourself. And then I know in a couple of blocks down the road, we're going to talk in-depthly with you. But please go ahead and share your first emotions.
My first emotions? Okay. I do want to say my name is Teresa. I am a family caregiver, and I have been for the last 26 years. I didn't always identify as a caregiver. I was just a wife who took care of her husband. He has a lot of chronic health issues, and I was there for him. I was doing all the things, but because I didn't identify, I missed out on the opportunity to take advantage of resources that were available to me. I love the subject matter, the question you asked at the top of the show about uncertainty, because as a caregiver, we live in a place of uncertainty. It's around every corner. And the way I manage that is by staying present, because uncertainty is usually something based on what we think will happen next, or maybe something we don't know what's going to happen next, right? So we're thinking about that thing. But if you stay present with what's right in front of you, just because God gives us just enough light for the step that we're on. So we focus on that. It helps to diminish that feeling of uncertainty. And also gathering information. The more information you can get, the less uncertain you may feel.
Let's talk about that for a moment, because Teresa, you bring up something very important in the time that we have in this block, dealing with, you said being present. And oftentimes I've watched people just kind of check out of a situation. They don't know what to do. They're literally paralyzed by fear. How do you help people discover when they're no longer present? I don't think people realize sometimes that they do just kind of zone out of a situation and become completely absent.
Well, fear is not something you can ignore. I mean, you know it in your gut. My son told me this. I don't know where he heard it, but he said fear is a greedy emotion. It doesn't it will rob you of every joy and everything in your life if you let it. And so when you get that pang of fear in your heart or in your gut, and you can't really be productive from that space. You can't think through any situation. You can't really solve problems because you're in flight or fight mode, right? And if you got to really get sensitive to understanding the cues that your body is giving you when you move out of that place of calm to another place of fear, so that you can stop and reassess. And a lot of that has to do with the things you're telling yourself. So if you're, stop and ask yourself a question: what am I telling myself that's making me feel this way? And then start telling yourself something else. It was the greatest gift I ever had when I learned that I could actually talk to myself. Even the Bible tells us to take captive our thoughts. And that's such a gift as a family caregiver.
You bring up some valid points. One of the things that you mentioned, I want to ask Stacey this question, because oftentimes that uncertainty and anxiety that Teresa mentioned trickles down into the family. And as an individual who works, with kids, you have your own school, Stacey. How does that play into kids' emotions and how they show up? Because oftentimes kids can't be present because something uncertain is going on in the home. How do we weigh and balance those things?
So usually when we know that something is going on in the home and the kid is not present to that moment or don't understand fully what's going on, you start to see changes in their behaviors. You can take a very active kid who can now be shy and withdrawn. Or you have some kids who they start acting out in class, and you know that this is not their typical behavior, but they don't know or have the words to communicate what is really happening. And then you have those ones who can communicate what's really happening, but have been taught that what happens in the home stays in the home. So they're not really sure how much information they are comfortable with disclosing to you. So what we try to do is keep an eye on what changes are occurring in those students, and then providing that resource, whether that is, an opportunity to talk to a teacher that they trust, or another staff member that they trust, to try to figure out what is going on with the child, and then help them to process through those feelings of uncertainties. And a lot of that can just be giving them the opportunity to hear from someone else something comforting, that it's going to be okay. And here's what you can do as a child. Here's how you can contribute to what's going on in the world around you. And often, a lot of times, that just results back to what are you needing to do so that you can be a help to your family situation. If you're doing the things that's expected for you to do in class, if you're keeping your emotions and your behaviors under control, then that in itself is helping whatever situation that's going on at home. So it's just about noticing changes and then helping students to process through that.
Being able to process oftentimes can seem like a daunting task. Mocha, you mentioned being able to run, to get outside. In that same vein, in working with children when they are experiencing those highs and lows of things that are happening in the home, what are some things that children can do to help balance what they are facing and experiencing, whether it be in the area of fitness or yoga or some of the other aspects that really help calm the mind for young people? What does that look like?
Well, you said it. You said yoga. And wow, I've been teaching yoga for so long. I even taught it in preschools. I taught it to my daughters in preschools. And I'm just here to tell you that children really receive that type of activity well. It depending on your environment. Some people call it yoga. Some people call it breathe and stretch. Whatever you want to call it, it's just a moment for kids to take the time to focus, and just like we've been talking about being in the moment, when you breathe and focus on your inhale and your exhale, it helps you stay right in the present moment, because you have to concentrate on what you're doing. And especially when you're doing the balancing poses, kids love that, the tree pose and different animal poses and dancer pose, because it requires you to be on one leg often. So you have to concentrate and focus on holding those poses. And so I love that a lot more people are becoming aware of how children do need not just regular old PE class, which is more about running and sort of, getting some of that energy out, but also the more calming side of activity, which is like a yoga class to help them breathe. And even at the end of a yoga class, you'll have what's called final meditation, where you just literally hit the pause button on your brain and try to just take a moment to be still and be quiet and appreciate that stillness.
Absolutely. When we come back after the break, I'm going to do one-on-one with Teresa. Some of the things that she mentioned really cause us to figure out, what does caregiving 101 look like, when we're back after the break.
Welcome to Atlanta, one of the most expensive housing markets in America. But rather than help out, Brian Kemp cashed in. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate. His net worth skyrocketed. And while Atlantans struggled to stay in their homes, Kemp gave $10,000 tax handouts to the richest Georgians and a nearly $700 million no-bid contract to his campaign donor. Brian Kickback Kemp, making Georgia work for him, not you.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, when we are faced with uncertainty, there are things that we need to do in order to get ourselves together, whether it's family conversations, whether it's a conversation with yourself, is running around, outside to just really collect who you are. It really requires us to take a good look at what's going on, establishing some baselines with the situation that we're facing. And I'm excited today to invite Teresa to our conversation. Hey, Teresa.
Hello, hello.
I am so delighted to talk with you today. This one-on-one opportunity, puts me in that space of being able to say, not only who is Teresa, but what does Teresa do in the life of a caregiver? Oftentimes people don't understand the steps and they don't know who to ask. Even if they may be at the hospital, the social worker may not have all their answers. And you've devoted, pretty much a good part of your life in caregiving for your husband to teach other people how to do the same. Talk to us about your journey first.
Okay, well, my background is in project management and administration. So I think that really gives me a leg up when it comes to caregiving because I approach it as if it was a business in some ways, meaning I go into it realizing that there's a lot I need to learn. I need to create systems. I need to create channels of communications. I need to know who the stakeholders are. I need to know what they bring to the table, and I don't neglect the fact that I have something to also contribute to the conversation, that everyone has a role. And as a caregiver, often we leave that responsibility in the hands of those with white coats on, right? We trust them to make all the decisions and tell us what to do. And that's the way most employees work. They go to work and someone tells them what to do. But when you own the company, the stakes are higher and it matters to you. So then you are part of the conversation and they are your vendor partners in some respects. And so when you go into caregiving, I want every family caregiver to realize that they are a partner in that care. And the person they're caring for is also part of that conversation. No matter where they are in their cognitive capacities, don't leave them out of the conversation. Make sure that everybody's voice gets heard and that you work together as a team. So you're learning to build a team to care for the person you love.
Now, you just mentioned something very interesting, that the person who is going to be receiving the care is also a partner in that care. How often do families, like, they hear a diagnosis and then they start talking about them among themselves about what they're going to do for the person? How often do people exclude the individual who is going to be receiving that care?
Right. It happens all the time. And doctors, they will talk to the person who is most vocal. So I'll walk into a room and my husband's had 5 strokes and he may be a little bit slow to answer and he has aphasia. So sometimes his words don't come out exactly right. And so they will look to me to give an answer. And I say, nope, give him a moment and give him a chance to answer for himself. It's important that he's a part of that because it's the human aspect. It shows dignity, gives him respect. It's his health and he needs to be able to weigh in on some of the decisions that are being made. And we just need to be patient. And I know that doctors like to get us in and get us out really quickly. So it's the caregiver's responsibility to advocate for their loved one and say, he can tell you the answer to that question. And if he can't, then you can chime in and answer. And so I try to be sensitive to that because it matters.
That level of sensitivity in the home, you mentioned a litany of things that I thought were extremely important because you did treat it as a business. That line of communication, and you mentioned stakeholders. How do families weigh who comes first in the order? Of course, if there's a spouse and then possibly children and others, but what does that look like? Because there's some people in our families where we're like, no, we're just literally clear that some people are not the people to be engaged and involved. So how do you establish a line of communication and get the buy-in? Because our families are struggling with so many having COVID and having, their long haulers, as they're calling them. There are other diseases. We're talking about breast cancer this month. You mentioned your husband with strokes, individuals who've had family members that are in car accidents. These are like long-term recovery style illnesses. This communication, it goes on and on and on. 2 questions for you. 1, how do you establish the communication chain? And then 2, when do you need to tap out as a caregiver to give yourself a break?
I'm going to answer those questions in reverse order.
Okay.
Getting a break is a challenge for most caregivers. You feel like you have to be sensitive to your own needs. And sometimes you have to be forced to trust someone else to care for that loved one. I know that's an area where I struggle, so I'm not going to pretend that I've mastered that yet. When I step away or go anywhere and someone else is in charge, I'm constantly thinking about my husband and is he okay? Is he taking his medication and those things? But it's necessary It's the most important thing you can do. Like on an airplane, when they say put your mask on first so that you can put the mask on someone that you love, you have to take care of yourself and you have to make it a priority. Now, as far as communication, everyone communicates differently. And in a family, we're all individuals. You're going to contribute differently and in different ways. Some people can't handle the heavy things. Some people can't talk to doctors or spend a lot of time in hospitals or do any of, it's such a complex issue. What I would say is accept people for where they are and what they're able to give and be grateful for that. And try not to leave anyone out of the conversation if you can. If your loved one wants to keep some things private, then respect their wishes, because their wishes are above everyone else's. But if you're working together as a family, try to include as many people as possible, because you're going to get a better result. I used to have my children talk to doctors. My children would come up with ideas on treatment. They would say, well, doctor, have you thought about this? Or have you thought about that? And I would hear doctors say, I didn't know that. I hadn't thought about that. So no, the doctors don't have all the answers. No one does. Sometimes you can have to rely on other people. So even include your children in those conversations.
I hear every word that you're saying. And I want to ask Mocha this question, because oftentimes, Mocha, you mentioned that we're not in these things that we face alone. How is it that when working with your clients, a lot of them are coming to you for therapy, you're, in that fitness arena, and in that rehab stage, where do people find their struggle the most? Because there's levels of embarrassment. And I think that both of you can identify, with the pride from the person who's going through a thing, and then the recovery and letting people in. Talk to us about that, bringing the village and the people alongside you.
Wow, that's a big deal, because I'm telling you, as a trainer and dealing with people in their physical body, I do notice that there's a lot of embarrassment right off the top. Just because I think people feel like they put a lot of pressure on themselves. So I would say same thing with all my clients who are caregivers. They put so much pressure on themselves, unfortunately, that I think they just feel ashamed that they haven't done all the expectations that they put on themselves, right? So I try to be that trainer that's tough but still mild and friendly. And, I just remind them that you can only do what you can do. Right. And I think that 9 times out of 10, if my clients can just take a moment and remember all that they have already done, just in general, like say, for example, and I'm thinking specifically about one of my clients in Philadelphia who cares for her mom who has dementia. And I just have to remind her, Tanya, look at you're a working woman yourself and you're taking care of your mom. So the fact that we meet at 6 o'clock in the morning to give you your self-care time, it's a beautiful thing. So if you're not, able to hold a plank as long as I'm pushing you, don't worry, because you're still showing up and doing something to take care of yourself. So I guess what I'm saying all that to say, I try to help clients and I try to help myself too. Let me be honest, just pull my expectation level down a little bit when the stress is high or when the responsibility is high, because we think we're super women. And in some cases, maybe it's cool to have the cape, but generally you have to be realistic and just pull back a little so that you don't just literally drive yourself crazy. And it is hard when you're embarrassed to reach out for help. But when you tend to sense you can trust someone, that's the time to say, boom, let me just ask you if you could help in this area, or let me just delegate and see if, someone else can do a part of the caregiving. And give me a break, So these are conversations I have with clients, believe it or not, even though we're supposed to be doing push-ups and sit-ups, all of this stuff comes up during the sessions, and it's rewarding and it's enriching. And I think everyone should do that as much as they can. Talk it out with people.
Absolutely. Anything to add, Teresa, before we go into our break?
I'm sure you're doing so much for those caregivers that you're working with. More than they could probably even vocalize. And so if I have anything to say, is to those people who are family and friends, step in wherever you can. Don't wait for an invitation. No one needs permission to come and do laundry or mow the grass or get the mail. you have my permission to go ahead and do those things.
Sometimes you're right, Teresa. It's the low-hanging fruit aspects of what we can do to step into another person's life in order to give them a sense of hope, peace, balance, and of course, dignity and respect. When we come back after the break, we're going to be moving into National Caregiver Month. So when we're back after the break, we're going to talk about what role can we each play.
Welcome to Atlanta, one of the most expensive housing markets in America. But rather than help out, Brian Kemp cashed in. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate. His net worth skyrocketed. And while Atlantans struggled to stay in their homes, Kemp gave $10,000 tax handouts to the richest Georgians and a nearly $700 million no-bid contract to his campaign donor. Brian Kickback Kemp, making Georgia work for him, not you.
Put 10 in here?
10, and you don't come out till you die. And you eat him, you hoop 10.
Oh my God.
So what?
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can see, we all have a role, a duty, and a responsibility to help our neighbor, our family, our friend. So many times we want to just leap in and we're not sure if we can. And Teresa said it. There's some things you do not need permission to do. Come do the laundry, get a meal train going, come over and cut the grass. Sometimes just sitting on the porch and having a talk is all it takes. Teresa, this National Caregiving Month that's going to be coming up, there's a national website, first of all, that tells people things that they can do. But what are ways that you have identified and have noted that allow people to really jump into that space and say, this is something that I can do and I should be involved?
Are you speaking from the caregiver's perspective or a family or friend?
I think it goes in all areas because sometimes people don't know where to jump in. How would you help people devise that aspect? If you're a caregiver, how do you engage with national caregiving? If you are a family member, what resources are there for you? If you're a community person and think that this is something you'd like to implement throughout where you live, how would you speak to people in those regards?
I would start by first identifying as a family caregiver. If you are helping someone with their finances, helping provide meals, taking them to doctor's appointments, or helping them with medications, even if they're not your blood relative, maybe they're a neighbor or a friend, then guess what? You're a family caregiver. And there are resources available for you from the federal government. Now, in the state of Maryland, those funds go down to the state, and each state gives those funds to the local county government, and they distribute them to caregivers. Reach out to your local family caregiver support office to apply for those funds to make your life a little bit easier. There are support groups and other resources. They will do an options assessment to help you out. If you are a family or a friend, help your friend identify as caregivers and point them in the right direction to the family caregiver support office in their area.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Stacey, when you think about children and families, because you have a generational school and your staff and your students come from families where there are a variety of people, how do you teach your children in your school the value of stepping in and offering help?
I think, you teach them how the value of how to step in just by reflecting on how it can be beneficial for them. I had this conversation with a young lady just yesterday. We were talking about the things that was going on in her home, and she and I was talking about, well, now reflecting on that, what can you do to help? And she was able to brainstorm some things that she can do at home that was different from what she typically does. And it just helped her to see the good in how, when you're able to give back, how planting those seeds of giving can, sow for you later on. So kids have a hard time sometimes understanding, especially if they're, depending upon the age, if they're still in that me stage where everything is about them. But I think through conversation, through modeling, through providing opportunities of showing them how they can help, it helps to move them from that space of just thinking about themselves to thinking about how they can be a bigger part of the unit and the picture that they're a part of.
And you bring up a valid point of view and perspective. Parents often shut kids down because they think they're too young, or that they don't want to understand, or they can't understand, or they think that they'll get in the way. What does this do to the self-esteem of the child when they can clearly see that something is going on and they're not allowed to play a part, or at least be asked to participate?
Yeah, because kids are resilient, and like our guest was saying, give them the opportunity to speak. They can come up with some wonderful ideas. Their voices is for this generation now. So when we shut them out, it makes them feel like they have no value, like they are nobody, like they have nothing to offer. And I've had kids say to me, my mom, they don't even listen. They don't even ask. They don't even this. And so it takes away their voice. And so I tell them whenever I have that come across my desk, well, what can you say? What can you go back and how can you present yourself in a respectful way? Because, everybody culture and everybody house is different. So we don't want you to cross any cultural lines and go in and be perceived as you're trying to get ahead of yourself. But how can you approach the situation and just say, hey, mom or dad or whoever, what about this? Or I would like, for you to hear this. So we just have to give them those stems that they can use to help start the conversation.
Thank you for sharing that, because I want to double back to Teresa for a moment, because I do follow Teresa on social media, and I often wonder how she's doing, because I know that she takes on a lot. And I know that some of you heard at the top when she said that her husband has had multiple strokes and she's been a caregiver for over 20 years. So Teresa has taken to TikTok, and I thought it was absolutely amazing. And I'm bringing this up, Teresa, because you engage your grands in this process. And so talk to us about that for just a moment, about how having your children and your grandchildren around have helped you balance all of the things that you face. And tell us about your TikTok learning experience.
Oh my goodness, I love TikTok. I had no idea I'd have so much fun. Yeah, so you see my little granddaughters, they come with me on TikTok, and they are very much a part of everything that we do at our home, because they bring so much joy to my husband and I, and we do involve them in conversations about his health. They may not have the language to express how they feel, but we try to listen and give them a space to feel and say whatever they think. And it's really it's healthy for them to do that. Now, TikTok has been a great resource for me to try to reach other family caregivers, and I make videos that are fun. And sometimes I include my husband in there, and he's trying to dance when he can dance. I could go on and on about that platform. It just reaches so many people so quickly. And I've learned how to condense my message down to 3 seconds. I can share an interesting point in 3 seconds. So can't get any better than that.
That is so amazing. And it's inviting in so many ways, because our children, Stacey, are living on social media, and to be able to see these generations work together. What does that do, Stacey, for the family when, parents, grandparents can get involved, and community is a part of the entire process of how we take care of our loved ones?
It helps to show that everyone has a role to play and everyone has a part, and everyone's language is different, So the way that I communicate with my generation is different from how these young kids are communicating with their generation. So when we can bring the two together, it helps expand the understanding of each other and the acts that we play in this world. So I think it's wonderful that groups are coming together to share important messages and using kids, because you know how many children are experiencing caregivers coming into their homes, and they can look at TikTok and see someone sharing such a message as our guest is speaking about, and it gives them a greater understanding as well. And then to be able to see another child is dealing with that same thing, it just expands the knowledge for everyone.
Expanding the knowledge in the home can go in a lot of different ways. And I appreciate what both of you are saying, because we are living in a generational society. You know, oftentimes we don't see, or in generations past have not had the opportunity to have multiple generations in the home. Teresa, why do you find that that's important when the generations can come together and collectively communicate and establish a baseline for moving their lives forward? How does that help with the balance of the home and the situation the family faces?
We all need each other. My husband and I, we need our grandchildren. They help us around the house. They can lift things that we don't want to lift, or they can get Pop-Up's medication. My 2-year-old granddaughter just loves bringing him his medication. But also they can sit with their Pop-Up and have conversations about life and share with them about what's going on in their world. And he's patient with them because people have been patient with him. So he moves a little bit slower because he's older these days. But families have gotten away from that. They don't maybe value the older people in their lives as much, and maybe older people don't value the children, but we need each other. We need each other very much.
I love this dialogue that we're having today, because oftentimes as we're growing and moving and we think about balance, I think it's been stated throughout the entire show is that people have been in this space, you ladies, for so long, thinking that we have to do it all ourselves. Mocha, join us for a moment, because as we're wrapping up this block, you know, we have been in that space of, I'm Superwoman, I wear my cape, I can do it all. And pride steps in and we don't know how to ask for help. Each of you share with me, for the time that we have, I'll start with Teresa. Why is pride problematic in caregiving?
Because, my husband and I just had a conversation about pride. He's the idea that you don't need anyone to help you, but we all need each other. And there are times when I need to help him, even if he wants to try to do it himself. He can actually put himself in danger by trying to do things that are beyond his capabilities or his limitations. And so it's something you have to address when you see it, because again, we need each other.
Mocha.
Yes, I honestly have to say, Dr. Jacquie, I was in shock when my 2 girls were babies, because that motherhood caregiving when they're infants had me just, I don't know if it's postpartum, or I think it's just that I'm not used to not having sleep. So to be a walking zombie and still trying to be a fitness person, it was crazy. Mm-hmm. So literally, it was the first time I had to say, oh my gosh, I have to reach out for help. Either have to ask my husband, a girlfriend, please come watch the kids just so I can take a nap maybe. Like it was just, that motherhood piece woke me up and said, oh, even if someone's not going to do it exactly like I would do it, let them do it, because there's no way I could do it all. And so there's some of us, unfortunately, I think I had a taste of the perfectionism situation that I had to shake off, which took a while. But if any of the viewers who are watching tend to lean to that perfectionistic side, you do have to figure out how to say, it's okay if the other person's not going to do it exactly the way I would do it. But as long as they're helping out and getting it done some way or the other, then let them do it. And yeah, I had to learn that.
Absolutely. Stacey.
You know, pride can be such a downfall. It can block a lot of help and a lot of positive things that can come towards you, just because it can turn off, people who have good intentions and want to maybe alleviate some of the stress that's around you. So pride can be very deadly, because it can prevent you from being able to move forward and being successful. So I know with my son, when he was going through his bout with cancer, he was very, in particular about who was around him and who was in his circle. And a lot of that pride came from him trying to avoid what he was perceiving as judgment. He had locks at the time and he was starting to lose his locks, and he didn't have that trust for everyone that was in his circle because he was judging himself. It didn't have anything to do with who was coming around, but it was the things that he was dealing within himself in terms of how he felt about how he was looking while losing his hair and that kind of thing, that it allowed his pride to get in the way. And then it allowed him to push people away, maybe not intentionally, but just through your actions. It allowed him to push people away. And those people could be people that have good resource for him. So we had to do a lot of self-work to help him to see that, at this state, these people are coming in and they're really wanting to help you. And it's okay. It's like, it's okay not to be okay. So what is it about you? That's my favorite question. What is it about your inner self that has you in this space that's allowing your pride to bubble up in this moment?
Absolutely. When we come back after the break, I want to talk about how having help, accepting help, and receiving help can bring balance to your life when we're back after the break.
Welcome to Atlanta, one of the most expensive housing markets in America. But rather than help out, Brian Kemp cashed in. He made hundreds of thousands of dollars in real estate. His net worth skyrocketed. And while Atlantans struggled to stay in their homes, Kemp gave $10,000 tax handouts to the richest Georgians and a nearly $700 million no-bid contract to his campaign donor, Brian Kickback Kemp, making Georgia work for him, not you.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Welcome back, everybody. As you can tell, caregiving is not easy, but it is something that is necessary and required. So as we're going to continue this conversation, there's the help you want and then the help that you need. And oftentimes it's hard to separate the two. I want to ask Teresa this question because sometimes people don't know what it is that they need. So Teresa, talk to us for a moment about what are some of the things that you've been able to identify and that you help your clients with to understand that they absolutely, no holds barred, have to have help with. What does that look like in the life of a family?
Well, in my family, you need someone that you can talk to that's going to allow you just to vent every now and then, who is not going to make you feel guilty because you're having a bad day as a family caregiver. You're going to have bad days. You need someone who can maybe partner with you when it comes to understanding all the medical jargon that doctors can overwhelm you with information, especially during discharge from hospitals. And if your situation is a lot more complex, you may need someone to come alongside you to help you make sense of it all, or to keep the information organized so that you can, when you're in an emergency situation, you can communicate that information. So that's been something that I always encourage caregivers to find someone who can be a partner with them, kind of like a partner in the caregiving process with them, someone who can take those notes or cover for them and go into doctor's appointments when they can't be there, who can speak on behalf of your loved one.
You mentioned when they come home, and I think that that's a transitional opportunity for us to discuss for just a moment, that when your loved one is at the hospital, everybody's there. They're always in like clockwork. And then all of a sudden, it's just you.
Right. Discharge day is one of the worst days, especially for me, because I always tell my husband he gets so spoiled in the hospital. He wants food, he just calls and they bring him whatever he wants from the menu, and every little thing, the nurses come in, and that's great. But when you come home, then the responsibility is on me, and I am aware of that. And most caregivers, they may feel something, but they may not be able. They haven't put words to it yet. Yes, there's added pressure when that loved one comes home. A lot of work has to happen within those first 24 hours to get acclimated back home, medications you pick up and things like that. So just be aware of that, give yourself some grace, and try to pace yourself.
Is that a good space for people to say, I know I'm going to need help. This is the help that I need. And it's also the help that I want, that this person's coming home. How far in advance should you ask family to start bringing certain meals over if you know you're coming home, so that you don't have that pressure? Oh, I never went to the grocery store. I don't know what to cook. I don't know what they can eat. How do we help families embrace the transitional stage that happens so rapidly between hospital and home?
Often I don't know whether he's going to be discharged that day until that day happens. Mm-hmm. And so don't be afraid to pick up and call Uber Eats. Most restaurants or someone will deliver food to the house. It's so easy to get groceries in the house these days. What I would say is that when you're going to, first of all, if you don't feel you're prepared, I've had situations where I wasn't prepared for him to come home. I didn't have the medication. I didn't know how I was going to care for him. Share that information with the doctors. They can give you an extra day sometimes to go home and get ready. They can make sure there are resources at home so you can get them out of the car into the house. Whatever you need, don't be afraid to voice that. But again, there are apps out there today that can help you.
In thinking of those things related to coming home and preparing yourself, I've often heard people say, I don't want anybody in my home. How do we break the stigma to get the help of saying, it's not about you? And I know that's hard for people to hear, but in that moment, it's not about you. How do we, especially in our culture, we're like, I don't want people in my house. I don't need a caregiver. I don't want them coming over for therapy, da, 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 da. And then we're losing out on valuable help. Talk to us about those things that we don't often say, but we feel and experience.
There's a lot of things that I don't like and I don't want to have happen that are happening. You have to learn how to accept some things. I may not want someone in my home, but I may have to have someone in my home. And it may turn out to be the best decision I've ever made. So you make decisions every day about what's most important. And I just say, give it a try. You may not know how valuable it's going to be until you try it. And if for some reason that person makes you feel uncomfortable, have a conversation with whoever sent them, the agency owners, and see if they can send you someone else. But they're usually pretty good at sending people who can do a really good job. If you can start in advance before you have a need, maybe vetting some agencies and getting things in place beforehand, all the better. Use that time now to find the best agency that you can work with, so you have them already, in your Rolodex.
Absolutely. Sound advice. Mocha, I have a question for you, because in coaching your folks, sometimes trust and attitude are part of the reason why we don't let people in. How do we manage, Mocha, those emotions around asking? Because the ask is hard. It's like going to the dentist. You don't want to do it.
Right. It is hard. And do you mean just people asking for just help in general, right?
Right. Asking someone to help. It's like, I don't want to ask anybody. And
well, it's tricky.
In that phase.
It is hard because I feel like in my case, by the time I'm working with someone, they've kind of broken through that fear of not trusting. And I think that if there are any entrepreneurs out there, you have to know that whatever you do in your business, word of mouth is a big deal, right? So I think depending on my personality, you end up attracting people who might be similar to you or can appreciate your style. Because I think as a trainer or anyone who's a life coach, you really have to just take people from where they are. And unfortunately, sometimes media or movies or shows just kind of make people in the fitness industry seem like they're like boot camp instructors and just like hardcore. Whereas I'm not necessarily that at all. As a matter of fact, my demographic is usually working moms, because I feel like they're so busy that if they don't make that appointment with me, then they might not ever take that time for self-care. So I don't know how people finally break through and say, I better reach out. But I think, well, sometimes though, they just realize they need that empowerment to come from someone else, right? Mm-hmm. If there's an area where you do not quite understand or feel fully confident, go to the person who is fully confident and let them just pour into you a little bit. And normally, I just hope I always give off the vibe that there is no judgment. I'm just taking you for where you are, and we're going to go from there. And but I'm still going to keep you accountable. That's the whole thing. That's the important part of the relationship. So,
I like that aspect, meeting people where they are. And those are very important. Stacey, I do have a question for you as we wrap up this block and prepare to end this wonderful time that we've had together. How do we decide, and when I say we, I mean you, because you have that ability, you have to step into homes and step into families. And oftentimes families won't come to you and say, but you have to go in sometimes and ask, do you need help? How do you break that ice? And give us some tips related to that.
You just ask. You have to be open enough to just go in the situation and just ask. But you got to understand who you're talking to. So I always say, relationships are key. So before I approach any family to ask about their needs or their desires, I'm first going to do my homework and try to learn a little bit about that family, a little bit about that culture, a little bit about what they're dealing with. And then I am going to go in a way that's gentle enough so that they'll know that it's a judgment-free zone. A lot of times when people struggle with asking for help, it's because they're trying to protect whatever they think you're going to judge them on. And if you can make them feel like, I'm not here to judge, I'm just here to provide a service or provide some assistance, and then allow them that space to come to you and share what they want to share in those moments, that's usually how I get in. And a lot of times I let people know that you're in control. Like, you're not giving up any control when you take or receive help, but you have to learn how to control the controllables. Know what your boundaries are and know how to communicate those boundaries to whoever's coming in to help. It's almost like a partnership, a dance that we have to do with each other. So tell me how you want to dance, lead me, and let me dance with you. It's pretty much the approach that I use.
I love that. The ebb and flow of caregiving definitely seems to have its space in this conversation that we're having today. Thank you, ladies, for being a part of our show. And Teresa, thank you for being our guest and sharing with us some of the tips and helps for what it means to be a caregiver and for your vulnerability and your transparency. When we come back after the break, I'll give my reflections.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punches!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay Black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now. We have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us.
We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is roland@rolandsmartin.com.
Welcome back, everyone, to A Balanced Life. And as you can tell, being a caregiver isn't easy. Now, I know this from firsthand experience. When our mom was in her last days, my sisters and I took the time to be caregivers. There was a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. And we each divided up our roles and responsibilities for how we were going to care for our mom. And I know that it's not easy when you think about the things that you need, the things that you have to have, how to have those conversations with the doctors, and when to invite people in your home when you just can't be there. The one thing that I will say to everyone is approach the situation with an open heart and an open mind. You are the person who will set the tenor and the tone for your loved one and how they are going to receive the care that you bring in from outsiders. I will tell you that my mom was one of those people who truly would say, I'm the mom, you're the daughter. And we understood what she was saying. And it was simply this. She had a difficult time accepting the fact that she was the one that always cared for us. And it was difficult for her to kind of release that and relax that standard, and that now her children were going to be her caregiver. Give yourself grace. Give your loved one grace and walk into the season that has been presented to you as a caregiver with love and patience. Thank you all for watching, and I pray that all of your caregiving days will be filled with joy, even in the midst of the highs and the lows. Bye now, and thanks for watching.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance.
We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.